Would you still stay if I had nothing to give?
Then I'd stay for what's left, because what's left is the part no one could take from you.
Will you stay if I undress? The Apache woman asked the cowboy who risked his soul to protect her. Arizona Territory, near the New Mexico line, March 1872. In a land carved by wind and silence, a broken soldier saves a hunted Apache woman, and through her eyes, he finds the courage to forgive the world and himself. The wind cut like iron filings through the pines that morning. It had that high country bite, the kind that scraped a man's lungs raw and made the world feel hollow. I was out checking the south fence line, same as every dawn, the rasp of wire and the creak of leather, the only company I'd kept for months. Out here, repetition was survival. You do a thing long enough and it becomes a kind of prayer. The ground was still frozen in patches, slick with old melt. My horse, Buck, snorted clouds of steam that drifted like ghosts between the fence posts. Beyond the pasture, the river glimmered dull and swollen, carrying the sound of trouble. The mountains had been shedding snow for 3 days straight. Every man in Dry Creek knew what that meant. The spring thaw was coming early and mean. I was tightening the last stretch of wire when it happened, that sound that didn't belong to the land. Not the shriek of a hawk, not the yelp of a coyote. It was a scream, human. It came thin and sharp, swallowed almost instantly by the roar of the river. My first thought was that I'd imagined it same way I sometimes heard cannon fire in the wind. But then it came again, higher, desperate, a voice that tore through the air and split me clean open. By the time the echo faded, I was already running. The land dropped quick toward the river, rough ground, loose shale, cottonwoods bending under the force of the current. I saw her there, a dark blur tangled among the branches of a fallen tree. The river was eating at her like a hungry beast, each surge pulling her closer to the depths. She wasn't dressed like any settler woman. Buckskin dress, beadwork glinting even through the spray, dark hair plastered to her face. She looked too small for that kind of fight. I didn't think. I dropped my hat, my gun belt, and kicked off my boots. The water hit me like a hammer, cold enough to steal the breath straight out of my chest. The current wrapped around my legs, tried to drag me under. I dug my hands into the current and kicked hard, my eyes locked on the woman. She was caught halfway under, her arm hooked around a branch, her body jerking with the pull of the water. Her lips were blue, her eyes were half shut. "Hold on," I shouted. The wind and water ripped the words apart. She didn't answer. I dove under. The cold punched through me, clean to the bone. My fingers found her leg wedged between two submerged limbs. It took everything I had to pry it loose. When the branch snapped free, she slipped toward the current, and I grabbed her by the arm. The next part was a blur of strength and fear. Somehow, we made it to the bank, half crawling, half clawing our way up the mud. I collapsed beside her, chest heaving, the roar of the river still pounding in my skull. She wasn't moving. I rolled her gently onto her side, pressed a hand to her neck, a pulse faint but there. Then she coughed, a harsh, scraping sound, spitting up a mouthful of river water. Her eyes opened green-gray, wild and frightened, like a doe that's run too long. "Easy," I said, voice low, rough. "You're safe." She flinched at the sound, tried to push herself back, but her arms shook too hard. "Where?" Her voice cracked. "Where am I?" "Near Dry Creek, my ranch." Her gaze darted around, panicked. "No town," she whispered. "Please, don't take me to town." I frowned. "I'm not taking you there. But you'll freeze out here." For a moment she just stared at me, like she was measuring something in my face, the weight of my words maybe, or whether I was the kind of man who said one thing and meant another. Then, finally, she nodded once. I lifted her into my arms. She was lighter than a sack of feed, but the way she went stiff told me she wasn't used to being touched without a price attached. The trail back to my cabin was slick and slow. The sky had gone iron gray, the kind that promised sleet before nightfall. Her head lolled against my shoulder, a few wet strands of hair sticking to my neck. The cabin sat where the land rose again, a squat thing of logs and sweat, the kind of home built by a man who didn't expect company. Smoke trickled from the chimney. I kicked the door open with my heel and carried her inside. The place was as plain as sin. One cot, one table, a small stone hearth, shelves with tins of coffee and jerky. The smell of damp pine and solitude hung in the air. I set her in the chair nearest the fire, stripped the wet blanket from her shoulders, and draped another dry one over her. "Get those wet things off," I said, turning away, stacking kindling with deliberate slowness. "There's privacy enough if I don't look." She didn't answer, but I heard the rustle of fabric behind me, the sound of fear and fatigue mixing in one trembling breath. I poured 2 cups of coffee, splashed a little whiskey into each. "This'll warm you faster than the fire." I set one beside her and retreated to the far wall. After a long silence, a voice came soft behind me. "You are not afraid of me?" I turned, met her eyes. "If I was, I wouldn't have pulled you from the river." She blinked, processing the words like they were foreign currency. Her hands, small and brown, wrapped tight around the tin mug. "My name is Taya," she said finally. "Ellie Mercer," I replied. "You're safe here, Taya." She didn't seem convinced. Her gaze flicked toward the door, then back to me. The firelight caught the edge of her cheek and a bruise, half-healed, spreading like a shadow under her skin. I didn't ask about it. A man learns when not to dig. Outside, the wind keened through the pines, thin and cold. Inside, the silence grew heavy enough to touch. Hours passed that way, me patching a torn saddle strap just for something to do, her wrapped in my blanket, staring at the flames as though they might tell her what came next. When the storm broke, sleet hissed against the window pane. She flinched each time thunder rolled over the hills. "You ought to rest," I said. "The cot's yours. I'll take the floor." "I cannot pay," she whispered, me hands stilled. "Didn't ask for payment. Let." She looked up, something flickering in her eyes. Disbelief, maybe. Then she said quietly, "Men always want something." I didn't answer. I just added another log to the fire and lay down with my back to her, the floorboards cold through my coat. For a long while, the only sound was rain ticking on the roof and her shallow breathing. Then she spoke again, barely above a whisper. "If I stay, will you not ask why?" "Not tonight," I said. "You're too tired to tell, and I'm too tired to listen." The silence after that was different, softer, somehow. I listened to her breathing slow. Then the small creak of the cot as she shifted. My eyes closed, but sleep didn't come easy. The image of her face, the fear, the defiance, the cold river light in her eyes, stayed sharp behind my eyelids. Out here, a man learned to live without expecting much from the world. But sometimes, when the land went quiet enough, it threw something back at you. A test, a chance, maybe even a reason. And that night, I had no idea which one she was. Outside, the river kept roaring, the sound filling the cabin like the heartbeat of something larger than either of us. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway, to keep more Wild West love stories coming. When dawn came, the world outside had turned white. Not snow exactly, just a crust of frozen sleet, brittle as glass. The river below still thundered, a brown, restless monster gnawing at its own banks. It would be days before it calmed. I got up early, made coffee so black it could wake the dead, and watched the steam curl against the window pane. She was still asleep, wrapped tight in my old army blanket, her breathing steady now. It struck me how small the cabin felt, with another heartbeat inside it. I stepped outside for wood. The air bit hard, and the world smelled of mud and thaw. When I came back, she was sitting up, watching the door like she'd been counting every second I was gone. "You left," she said, her voice hoarse. "Just for firewood," I answered. "Didn't figure you'd run off in a storm." Her gaze drifted toward the river. "I would have, if I could." "Then maybe it's a good thing the water's high." That earned me a look sharp, unreadable. We ate in silence. Dried meat, cornbread, and the kind of quiet that feels heavier than words. She kept her back straight, like even sitting was something that needed permission. After breakfast, I went about chores. She watched from the chair, eyes following every motion. Finally, she said, "You live alone?" "Most days, yeah. Had a hand or two once, but they left when the pay dried up." "Oh, and before that?" "Before that there was war," I said simply. Her eyes dropped to her cup. "War takes from everyone." That was the first true thing she said all day. By noon, she'd found a rhythm around the cabin. She dried her dress by the fire, braided her hair, then asked if she could help. "You don't have to," I told her. "I do," she said. "Work keeps the heart steady." So I let her. She helped mend a saddle strap, her hands deft and careful. Later she went outside, collecting herbs that had survived beneath the overhang. She crushed them with a stone, mixing them with lard from the tin by the stove. "What's that for?" I asked. "Your horse," she said. "His leg is swollen." She was right. Buck had twisted his ankle 2 days ago. I watched her work, the motion steady, the scent of crushed sage filling the room. There was grace in her movements, but not softness, more like a survival, learned from years of watching the world break and still having to stand. When she finished, she washed her hands in a bowl of melted snow and looked around. "Your place is clean," she said. "Too clean, like a man who doesn't expect visitors." "Guess I don't." She studied me a long time. "Do you speak to God, Eli Mercer?" "Not much. We had words once. Haven't since." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "Then we are alike." That evening, the wind howled against the walls like a living thing. The storm was worse than I'd seen in years. The door shuddered, and the chimney moaned low, a lonely sound. I fed more wood to the fire, its orange light spilling across the rough floorboards. Taya sat near the hearth, working the beads on her torn dress, threading them back into place with a piece of horsehair. Her fingers were quick, precise. I poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. "You fixin' to leave once the river drops?" Her eyes stayed on her work. "Maybe. You got a place to go?" She hesitated. "A place that no longer wants me." "Someone hurt you?" The words hung there, heavy and uninvited. She didn't look up. "Many tried. Some succeeded." I said nothing after that. There's a kind of pain a man shouldn't prod. After a while, she asked, "Why did you save me?" I shrugged. "Didn't seem right to let anyone drown within sight of my land." "End of." "That is not an answer," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It ain't." Later, when the fire died to coals, she moved to the window, staring into the night. "Do men in your world ever forgive themselves?" Her question caught me off guard. "Don't rightly know. Most don't try." She nodded like she understood. After a long silence, she spoke again. "My mother used to say the river remembers everything, every word, every sin. When it floods, it brings the past back to your door." Oh, I looked at her, at the shadows shifting across her face. Then I reckon we both lived too close to it. Her lips curved half smile, half sadness. The next morning dawned clear but cold. Steam rose off the river like ghosts heading for the hills. I went out to the barn to check the horses. When I came back, she was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like heaven after 3 days of jerky. "I found some beans," she said. "Hope I didn't steal your supper." "Oof. You call it stealing if it's feeding both of us." "I've learned to ask first." "You don't have to ask here." Her hand stilled on the spoon. "That's not what I'm used to hearing from men." I didn't answer, just set 2 tin bowls on the table. We ate slow, the sound of spoons against metal filling the quiet. When she finally spoke again, it was so soft I almost missed it. "I was promised freedom once," she said. "But freedom in a cage is still a cage." I looked at her then. The firelight painted her face in gold and shadow. "You're free now," I said. "Am I?" she asked. "You don't know who's looking for me. Don't need to. You're here. That's all I know." Her gaze met mine, sharp as flint. "You should know. It might save your life." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Lady, my life's been on borrowed time since '63. You just make yourself warm." She held my eyes a moment longer, then looked away. But something changed between us, small, quiet, like the sound of thawing ice. That night, she took the cot again. I stayed near the fire. The storm had finally broken, leaving only the low moan of the river. Sleep came slow. My mind drifted to places I'd buried, deep fields of smoke, boys crying for their mothers, the taste of iron and fear. Somewhere in that blur, I heard her whisper, "Eli." I turned my head toward the cot. "Yeah? Do you dream? Not the kind worth remembering." Late. She was quiet for a long while. Then, barely audible, "When I dream, I see water. It keeps pulling me under, and I keep swimming toward a man whose face I can't see." The fire cracked softly between us. "Maybe that's just the river remembering," I said. "Maybe," she murmured, and her breathing steadied again. 2 days passed that way. The world shrank to the size of the cabin, fire, wind, coffee, silence. Yet something in that silence shifted. It wasn't the awkward quiet of strangers anymore. It was the calm of two souls learning not to flinch. On the third morning, I found her outside, tending the horse. She'd wrapped her hands in cloth and was brushing Buck's coat with careful strokes. The animal, mean as he could be, stood still under her touch. "He likes you," I said. She smiled faintly. "Horses listen better than men. They don't speak lies." I couldn't argue with that. She went on, voice low. "In my people's tongue, we call the horse bacho, brother. When a man forgets he's kin to what carries him, he loses his spirit." "Guess there's a lot of lost spirits around here," I muttered. She looked at me, eyes bright with something fierce. "Then find yours before it dies." That hit deeper than I cared to admit. That evening, we shared the last of the beans and sat by the hearth. The storm clouds had cleared, revealing a slice of moonlight that silvered the river outside. I took out my harmonica, the one thing I'd kept from the army, played a slow tune, something half remembered from a Tennessee night long ago. When I finished, she said softly, "That song, it sounds like home." "Where's that?" I asked. She smiled, small and sad. "Wherever the wind doesn't hurt." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. She turned toward me then, her face open in the flickering light. "Thank you, Eli," she said, "for not asking too much. You don't owe me thanks." M0. "I know. That's why it matters." She rose, moved to the door, opened it a crack. The night air slipped in, cool and full of pine. She stood there a long moment, looking out at the stars. "I used to believe the spirits lived in the mountains," she said. "But I think now they live in people. The good ones, the ones who don't run from pain." "Then you'll fit right in," I said quietly. She turned, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. "You think I will stay?" I met her eyes. "I think the land decides who stays, not me." She nodded slowly, then closed the door. The fire threw our shadows long against the wall, two shapes that didn't quite touch, but didn't drift apart either. And for the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt alive. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. By the 5th day, the river started to change its tune. The roar had softened to a murmur, the color lightening from mud to slate. You could smell spring hiding under the cold, that sharp green scent that meant life was stubborn enough to come back again. Taya stood outside the cabin that morning, watching the current with a look that was half relief, half dread. I understood. When the water dropped low enough to cross, she'd have to decide which side of it she wanted to live on. I busied myself splitting logs, pretending not to notice her eyes on the horizon. "You'll leave when it clears," I said finally. She didn't answer. Just tied her hair back and began stacking the firewood I'd already split. "You could stay," I added after a beat. She smiled small, tired. "And what would I be here, Eli Mercer? A ghost in your cabin? Guess I could use the company of a quiet ghost." That drew the faintest laugh from her, low and real. But before either of us could say more, Buck's head shot up, ears pricked toward the ridge. A dust plume rose in the distance, one rider, coming fast. My gut tightened. Nobody rode out this way unless they had business, and business in these parts was rarely good. "Taya," I said, my voice low. "Go inside." She hesitated. "Who is it? Let's find out without him finding you." She slipped into the cabin without another word, closing the door just enough to leave a crack for air. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked out to meet the rider. He came down the trail like a man with questions that wouldn't wait. His horse was a big roan, wet with sweat. The rider wore a long duster and the kind of grin that always hid a gun beneath it. "Well, I'll be damned," he called out. "Eli Mercer, thought you'd gone and buried yourself up here for good." My stomach sank a notch. I knew that voice. "Clay Danner," I said flatly. "You're a long way from town." "No." He reined in, spit to the side. "Sheriff's office got a notice from Tucson. Says a Chiricahua woman is wanted for theft and maybe murder. You wouldn't have seen anything unusual floating down your river, would you?" I kept my face still. "Only logs and trouble, same as always." He grinned wider. "Funny thing, a trader down at Dry Creek swears he saw someone ride north before the flood, Apache woman, wearing beads like gold dust. Said she had a sack she wouldn't let go of." I met his eyes. "Trader talk ain't gospel." "No, but gold's a language folks listen to." He leaned in his saddle, eyes sweeping over the yard, the cabin, the corral. "You don't mind if I look around, do ya?" "I do, actually." His grin faded a shade. "You hiding something, Eli?" "Just peace, and you're disturbing it." He stared a long moment, jaw tight. "You've always had that high and mighty soldier way about you. Thought the war taught you better." "Love." "The war taught me not to shoot a man unless I mean it," I said quietly. "Don't make me relearn it." The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Then he laughed loud, forced. "Easy, old friend, just doing my duty." "Then do it somewhere else." He tugged the reins, but his eyes lingered on the cabin door. "You take care, Mercer. River's washing up all kinds of things lately. Secrets, lies, bodies." When he finally turned and rode off, the air felt thin again. I waited till the dust cloud vanished before I went inside. Taya stood by the hearth, hands clenched so tight the knuckles were white. "He knows," she whispered. "He suspects," I corrected. Her voice shook. "He'll come back." "Probably." She backed up a step. "I can't stay here, Eli. You'll get dragged into this. You planning to swim that river again?" Her chin lifted. "Better to drown than burn." "Who said anything about burning?" "The men who want me alive," she said bitterly. "They'll bring fire if they have to." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't scared the way most people get scared. It wasn't about pain. It was about memory. Whatever she'd run from, she'd already lived through worse. "Tell me the truth, Taya," I said. "What's chasing you?" For a long time, the only sound was the river outside and the tick of cooling wood in the stove. Finally, she spoke. "A man named Boone. He worked with a prospector, Marcus Thorne. They found a small vein of gold in the Sierra foothills. When Marcus died, Boone said I'd taken what was his, but there was no gold, only a handful of coins I'd earned cleaning his camp." Her voice faltered. "Boone said he'd collect his payment in flesh if I couldn't give him the dust." The words twisted in the air, ugly and raw. "I ran," she continued. "The river tried to stop me. You pulled me out." I rubbed a hand over my jaw, feeling the weight of her confession settle like lead. "You believe me?" she asked. "Don't see a reason not to." Her brow furrowed. "Most men would. I'm not most men." That made her smile barely, but it was there. "No," she said softly. "You're not." For 2 nights after that, neither of us slept much. The river dropped another foot, slow but steady. The air felt charged, waiting. On the 3rd morning, I saddled Buck early, checked my rifle, and rode to the ridge overlooking the valley. Dry Creek sat 12 miles south, a cluster of buildings wrapped in dust and bad habits. Through the spyglass, I saw riders moving too many for a peaceful day. Danner was among them, talking to 2 strangers I didn't recognize. One wore a black hat, the other carried a sawed-off shotgun. They'd come for her. By noon I was back at the cabin. She was kneeling by the river, washing a bundle of herbs. When she saw my face, she knew. "How long?" she asked. "Maybe half a day. Less if they ride hard." She straightened, eyes calm now. "Then I should go." "You go now, they'll catch you in the open. Then you'll be caught with me. I've been caught by worse things than conscience." She stared at me, the wind tugging at her hair. "You don't owe me this." "Maybe not, but maybe I need it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. Why? Because a man gets tired of doing nothing right in a world that keeps proving him wrong. We packed quick. Dried meat, water, my rifle. She took nothing but a small pouch of herbs and that beaded string she always wore. By the time the sun dipped, we were in the foothills, the land breaking into ridges and scrub. I knew a canyon up north, narrow, hidden. A man could vanish there for days. We made camp under a rock shelf. The fire burned low, more smoke than flame. She sat opposite me, knees drawn up, blanket around her shoulders. "You'll freeze without sleep," I said. "I've been colder." "Oh, you don't have to be now." She looked into the fire, the reflection flickering in her eyes. "You don't understand. If they find us, they'll call me thief, liar, savage. You'll be the fool who believed me. I've been called worse by better men." That pulled a small laugh from her, but her shoulders still trembled. I reached into my coat, pulled out a small tin. Inside were 2 bullets and an old photograph, me and a boy, both in Union blue. She glanced at it, curiosity softening her expression. "Your brother? Samuel. Didn't make it home." She studied the photo a moment, then said, "You still carry him?" "Only thing worth carrying." She nodded. "Then you understand what it means to keep a ghost." "Maybe." The night went still. Coyotes called far off. The fire popped. Then, softly, she said, "If I die, will you tell the truth about me?" "Only if you live long enough for me to know it." That made her smile again, tired, sad, but real. By dawn, hoofbeats echoed down the canyon. "They're close," I said. Taya's hand went to the knife at her belt. "Then I go the other way." I shook my head. "No one runs in open daylight out here. You'll die before they ask your name." She stared at me. "Then what do we do?" "Make them forget what they came for." I climbed the ridge, found a good perch among the rocks, and sighted down my rifle. 3 riders entered the mouth of the canyon, Danner and the 2 from town. I fired a warning shot. The bullet sparked off stone an inch from Danner's boot. He looked up, face pale. "Mercer, you damn fool, you're harboring a fugitive." "Only thing I'm harboring is my patience," I called back. "Turn around before I lose it. Don't make this worse." "Can't get worse. You already brought hell with you." The man in black spurred his horse forward, shotgun raised. I didn't aim to kill, just grazed his arm. The blast sent him reeling, cursing. The others pulled back quick, dust kicking up around them. Danner shouted something I didn't catch, then turned his horse and rode off. When the sound faded, I lowered the rifle, chest tight with the slow burn of adrenaline. Behind me, Taya exhaled shakily. "You could have killed him." "Didn't need to." She looked at me, eyes wide with something more than fear. "Why?" "Because if I start shooting every man who chases ghosts, I'll never stop." We stayed hidden till sundown. When the light went gold across the ridge, she said quietly, "You didn't have to save me again." "Maybe I did," I said. "You said the river remembers." "Well, maybe I don't want it remembering me as the man who let you drown twice." She smiled faintly, looking down at her hands. "You talk like a preacher who doesn't believe his own sermon." "Oh, maybe that's the only kind worth listening to." She laughed then, the first sound of real warmth I'd heard from her, the kind that shakes something loose in your chest. And in that canyon, with the world holding its breath, I realized it wasn't just her I'd been saving. It was whatever piece of me still believed mercy had a place in this land. "Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you." We stayed in the canyon after Danner rode off. The world went still, no echo of hooves, no river noise, just the sound of 2 people trying to remember how to breathe. The stone held the day's heat. The fire crackled low. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe enough to sit without a rifle across my knees. Taya was across from me, wrapped in my coat, her eyes fixed on the fire. The flames made her face flicker between shadows and gold. She looked calmer, but I could see the thoughts moving behind her stillness. "You didn't have to protect me," she said quietly. "I know." "Then why?" I stirred the embers with a stick. "Because a man's got to protect something, or he starts turning to stone." She gave a small nod, staring at the coals. "My people say the stone remembers everything." "I reckon that's true." Silence again. the kind that sits between two souls when they've both seen too much. I watched the smoke twist up into the night, and after a while I said, "You still shaking?" "Not from fear," she answered. "From remembering." That was the first time she looked me straight in the eye. Her gaze was steady, not pleading, just honest. We shared coffee from a tin cup, passing it back and forth. She talked a little, voice low, and even about her father, who taught her the names of stars, and her mother, who hid her from soldiers. About Boone, the man who treated her like property, and the night she ran before sunrise. When she finished, the canyon was silent except for the fire. I said nothing. There are times when words ruin the truth. After a while, she asked, "What about you, Eli Mercer? Who taught you to fight ghosts?" "War did," I said, "and losing my brother." She studied me, the firelight trembling in her eyes. "You carry him with you still." "Only thing I got left that don't rust." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's why you understand me." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe we're both just too stubborn to quit." That made her laugh softly, the first true laugh I'd heard from her. It was a quiet sound, but it cut through the dark like a match in a cave. The fire burned lower. She leaned closer, the coat slipping off her shoulder. I saw the thin scars along her back, white against the brown of her skin. Not wounds anymore, just stories the world had written on her. "Do they hurt?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Only when someone looks at them too long," she said. I looked away, jaw tight. She studied me for a long time. Then she said it soft, steady, and certain. "Will you stay if I undress?" The words froze the night. They weren't a tease. They were a test, heavy as a gun on the table. I swallowed hard, kept my eyes on the fire. "You don't need to pay me, Taya. That's not what I meant." She shifted closer, voice barely a whisper. "Every man I've met wanted something. I need to know what kind you are." I turned to her, met her gaze full on. "The kind that stays without taking." Her breath caught. "Then, why?" "Because you've had enough men make you smaller. I ain't gonna be another one." The fire cracked between us, bright and sharp. For a long while, she said nothing. Then her hand trembled as she reached for the coat and pulled it tighter around herself. "Nobody's ever said that to me," she whispered. "Then let that be the first thing worth remembering." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she smiled tired, grateful. The kind of smile that feels like sunrise after too many storms. "Thank you, Eli." I nodded. "You get some rest. I'll keep watch." She hesitated, her voice barely more than breath. "Would you still stay if I had nothing to give?" I looked at her, then really looked. The firelight caught the edges of her face, half light, half shadow. "Then I'd stay for what's left," I said quietly, "because what's left is the part no one could take from you." She didn't answer, just closed her eyes, the hint of a tear tracing down her cheek, and for the first time, she looked like someone who finally believed she was worth keeping. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Even if I dream bad dreams?" "All night," I said. "You won't face them alone." She lay down by the fire, wrapped in my coat. Her breathing came uneven at first, then steadied. I sat beside her, watching the flames shrink into coals. The canyon outside was pitch black, the sky full of stars bright enough to blind a man who'd forgotten beauty. After a while, she stirred in her sleep, whispering words I didn't know. I touched her shoulder gently. "You're safe," I said, voice low. "You're home." She relaxed again, a faint sigh escaping her lips. I leaned back against the rock, eyes on the stars, and thought about how strange it was that peace could come from two people the world had already tried to break. In the firelight, her face looked soft, unguarded. For once, she wasn't the hunted woman or the wounded survivor, just human, and that, somehow, was enough to make the night feel sacred. The dawn came pale and cold. She woke slowly, blinking against the light. When she saw me still sitting there, her voice was husky with sleep. "You stayed." I said I would. A small, steady smile spread across her face. "Then maybe not all promises break." "Not this one." She reached for my hand, fingers warm from the fire. "Then maybe the river will remember us kindly." "Let's give it something worth remembering," I said. And for the first time in years, I believed it. If you're watching on TV, Don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. Morning found the canyon rinsed clean. The storm had gone, and the air held that soft hush that comes after something dangerous has passed, but hasn't been forgotten. The river below no longer roared, it hummed, low and calm, like an old tune a man might whistle while mending fences. Taya stood at the edge of the ledge, watching the water twist silver under the first light. She was still wearing my coat, sleeves rolled, her hair unbraided. I'd never seen her look younger or freer. "River's going down," I said, breaking the silence. She nodded. "It's time to move." "Where to?" "I don't know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe here." She glanced back at me. "Do you ever stop running, Eli Mercer?" "Only long enough to remember why I started." That pulled a small smile from her. Then her face changed. She was looking past me, toward the ridge. A single rider, dust rising. My hand went to the rifle by habit. The man came closer, slow, cautious. It wasn't Danner this time, it was a kid, barely 20, face red from sun and pride. He stopped 10 yards off and lifted his hat. "You Eli Mercer?" "I might be. Depends who's asking." "Clay Danner sent me," he said. "Told me to give you this." He handed over a folded piece of paper, edges damp with sweat. I read it once, twice. The handwriting was rough, but clear. "Mercer Boone's dead. The law got to him before we could. Turns out the gold was fool's dust. Your river's clear. Keep your head low. Danner." I folded the note and tucked it in my pocket. "You tell Clay I appreciate the courtesy." The boy nodded and turned his horse around, kicking up dust all the way down the canyon. When he was gone, Taya asked, "What did he say?" "Your ghost's buried," I said. "Boone won't come looking." She let out a long, trembling breath, the kind that shakes loose everything you've been holding. "Then I'm free." "Guess you are." She walked toward the river, boots sinking in the damp sand. "You ever wonder what freedom costs, Eli?" "All the time." "And you still pay it?" "Only way I know how." We broke camp slow, packed what little we had, my rifle, her herbs, a bit of jerky. When everything was ready, we just stood there, not quite knowing which direction meant goodbye. "I could go back to Dry Creek," I said finally. "Sell the land, head north, lawn, and leave all this. Sometimes leaving's the only way to stay sane." She shook her head. "Or maybe staying's the only way to heal." Her words hung in the air, simple as prayer, sharp as truth. I looked at the sky, clean blue, no threat in it. For once the land felt like it was listening instead of judging. "Taya," I said slowly, "you could stay a while. Work the horses, mend the fences. Nobody in town'll bother coming this far again." Her eyes softened. "Would you want that?" "I reckon I already do." She smiled, then small, honest, the kind that finds its way into a man's chest and builds a home there. The ride back took most of the day. The land stretched wide and golden. The cabin came into view as the sun sank, smoke curling from the chimney where I'd left the damper cracked. The place looked different now. Not just mine anymore. Inside, she started unpacking without asking, set her herbs by the window, folded a blanket at the cot's end, swept the floor like she was claiming it. "You act like you've been here before," I said. She looked around. "Maybe I have. Not this cabin, but this feeling." "What feeling?" "Belonging." I didn't have an answer for that. I just nodded, throat tight. We ate beans and drank coffee by the fire. Outside, the river murmured, no longer angry, just alive. After supper, I took out the harmonica again, played low, the same tune as before. When I finished, she was watching me, chin propped on her hand. "You know," she said, "in my tongue, Taya means the one who returns." "That so?" She nodded. "I ran a long time. I think this is where I stop." "I'd be a fool to argue," I said. The days that followed folded into something quiet and steady. The land turned green again. She planted herbs by the door. I fixed the corral. Sometimes she'd hum while she worked, old Apache songs that sounded like the wind remembering its own voice. We didn't talk much about what had happened. Didn't need to. Healing doesn't always sound like words. Sometimes it's just the rhythm of chores shared by two people who finally stopped flinching. But one evening, as the light went copper and the river shimmered with it, she said, Do you think people can start over? I think that's all people ever do, I said. The trick's not to forget what broke you, just not to let it keep breaking you. She nodded, thoughtful. And what about you? What do you want now? I stared out at the river, its surface smooth and wide. Peace, I said, and a reason to believe it lasts. She stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on my arm. Maybe that reason doesn't come from the land or the war. Maybe it's standing right in front of you. I turned to her then. Her eyes caught the last of the sunlight, green, deep, alive. I reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. I believe you, I said. That night we sat outside. No fire, just stars.